Hello, my friends. It's Tuesday, July 15th, 2025, and I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville, your Red State refugee. And welcome to the Radical Russ Show, coming to you from Rolla J Studios in my undisclosed mountain hideaway in the beautiful state of Jefferson region of Southern Oregon. Coming up on this week's Smoke Session, these are not the droids you're looking for, and there was no Jeffrey Epstein. ICE continues racially profiling immigrant workers so Americans on Medicaid can pick crops. Democrats funded by AIPAC predictably quiet about Israeli West Bank terrorists beating an American to death. Republicans believe that a year ago God killed a firefighter but spared Trump. Homicide rates in American cities approaching all-time lows. Red states like Missouri and Idaho hate citizen initiatives, and my call for a constitutional convention to fix American democracy. But before we get to all that serious stuff, just three quick hits here I want to get out of the way. And first of all, the reason you're listening to this on a Tuesday rather than a Monday is because yesterday, Lady Love and I decided that we would go rafting the mighty Rogue River in Josephine County. One of our hobbies. We like to get the parking passes for the year and between our two cars take the rafts up and have some fun on the river. We spent 4 hours on the river yesterday from the Pierce Riffle Park all the way to the White Horse Park, so we're getting the timings down. If you'd ever visit Southern Oregon and would like to raft the mighty Rogue River, check out RadicalRuss.com and search Rogue River to find my guide to the times and the load in and load out spots. Well, this weekend on Sunday, the 13th, was the 40th anniversary of the Live Aid concerts back in 1985. I was in basic training in Fort Dix, New Jersey, so when I heard that SiriusXM's 80s on 8 channel was going to be doing a special Live Aid at 40, I was really looking forward to it because I never got to hear those concerts when they were happening. So imagine my disappointment when I turn on SiriusXM at noon as promised, and they have the big intros, Live Aid at 40, a concert that changed the world. And they opened up by playing a bit of Queen's set where Freddie Mercury leads the crowd through the first part of Bohemian Rhapsody and a little bit of Radio Gaga, and I was pretty excited. It's like, all right, we're opening with the best set. This is going to be a fantastic day driving around listening to all this Live Aid concerts. But after that song was finished, they played Tom Petty's Free Fallin', a song that didn't even exist back then, and it was just off the record. Like, okay, that's weird. And then the next song that came up was another one of the Live Aid songs, and they did a little Live Aid at 40, and it was Madonna doing Holiday. Like, okay, so maybe they're going to play a song every now and then from Live Aid at 40 in with the regular programming. And then after Madonna, it went back to just regular music, and then more regular music, and then more regular music. I'm like, are we going to play any more Live Aid stuff? And I don't know, sometime in the 1 o'clock hour, I think they played the Live Aid version of We Are the World, which was terrible. Oh my God, it was just terrible. And then after that, more regular music all the way till like 2 o'clock. So in the span of 2 hours, this big Live Aid at 40 special that they were hyping was 3 clips. That was it. I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to turn on to another station, because I was really disappointed in that follow-through from SiriusXM. Here you have this big 40th anniversary. You're the 80s channel. It was the concert of my generation, right? Not gonna count Woodstock 99, right? So the concert of my generation, 1985. I'm 17 years old. It's our Woodstock, so to speak, and all you could give us was 3 clips. That's pretty pathetic, Sirius. But when I was out driving around and giving ride shares, I had a really interesting experience. There's a lot of wineries and special events that go on in Southern Oregon. And this time I happened to pick up 5, I guess it was 6 of them, 3 couples of young people, all kids whose, birth years start with a 20, 21st century kids, all dressed up, ready to go to some wedding party or something like that. We get them all in the car, and this kid who's sitting next to me starts talking and asking if he could have a request. I'm like, yeah, sure. What do you want to play? And I'm figuring turn it on to some hip hop station, listen to some 808 drum machines for a while, whatever. I can handle it. But no, he wants me to play Big Balls by AC/DC, a song from 1976's album Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. A song that was popular when I was in high school. So I'm like, all right, cool. So I cranked it up. The whole car, this whole car of teenagers, well, not teenagers, they were in their 20s. This whole car of kids are just singing along to Big Balls, full-throated. You know, if I'm ever upper class, high society, they're right into it, laughing, having a good time. And I got to thinking that, you know, Big Balls to kids their age, you know, with their birth years starting in a 20, is kind of like when I was a kid listening to Dr. Demento and that one novelty song came on, Shaving Cream. Had a head full of shaving cream instead of shit, right? It's basically the same idea, you know, this bawdy, ancient novelty song that kids get a snicker out of because it says dirty words or doesn't say dirty words, right? So, everything old is new again. And speaking of old, too, you know, I'd mentioned in the last podcast I'd gone to my 40 class reunion, class of 85 in Nampa High School. So these kids, when they're in the car, we finally get to the location after singing Big Balls, and they're getting out of the car, and the kid who is sitting next to me finally notices that I'm wearing a Boise State hat. And he's like, oh my God, Boise State. I'm like, yeah. And so I give my typical line, which was I was the alternate Buster Bronco mascot in the last year that Boise State had a green football field. 1985. In 86, they put in the blue Smurf turf, so-called Smurf turf, right? So he's like, oh my God, you're the mascot? Man, I want to see pictures. Show me some pictures. I want to see some pictures. And I'm like, son, you need to understand something about us olds. We don't have pictures of every day of our life like you guys do. We don't have pictures. Like, and I got to looking, like, I don't have any pictures of me at college. At all. I have some pictures of me in college apartments with some of my friends that I went to college with. I have some road trips we went on at the time I was in college, but not a single picture of the Boise State campus, of any of the cheerleading groups that I was in, of any of the cheerleaders, or anybody really at school doing something. I actually have no photographic proof that I ever went to Boise State University. And to think the kids these days with the 20s in their birth year will have a picture of themselves literally from every day of their lives. Well, the big news this week is it turns out that we were all wrong. This whole Jeffrey Epstein thing where he had an island and he would fly people out to it and they would traffic young girls, some under the age of consent, some over, to high profile, very powerful, wealthy men. Apparently it was all a misunderstanding. Yeah, apparently there was nothing bad going on there. According to our esteemed president felon of the United States, there was no Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein never existed. What's the big deal? Why are we talking about this guy? So everybody's been giving their takes on this. And it's quite hilarious watching MAGA fall apart on this, because I think that Trump has really no concept, because Trump doesn't believe in anything, right? Trump's transactional on everything. He has no belief other than what is good for Donald Trump, right? So it doesn't matter. He could be pro-choice when he was in the 90s and getting laid and needing to pay for abortions, but now that he's older and needs the evangelicals, he can be, anti-abortion, right? He has no principles. He has no scruples. He has no morals. So he can't understand people that do. And I'm going to grant a lot of leeway here in discussing about the morality of MAGA, but there is a code there. There is a moral through line to these MAGA folks, as crazy as they are. And one of those through lines is that the world is run by an elite cabal of liberal democratic interests that are involved in a global child sex trafficking ring that involves harvesting their adrenochrome for ultimate youth, blah, blah, blah. It's this crazy QAnon crap, but they believe it, right? And they've organized their lives and their identities around it. Politics is all about having a heroic story, having a journey, there being an evil that must be vanquished, and you're the hero that can vanquish it, and the people that vote for you are a part of your hero's journey. They're empowering you to take down the evil, whatever it may be. And, you know, for progressives, it's the evil of capitalism and billionaires hoarding all the wealth and massive inequality and, you know, justice for everyone, even if they have brown skin. Those are the kind of things we believe in. Well, on their side, they have a similar, you know, feeling for their beliefs in that the world has been, you know, taken over by this cabal of elites that hate traditional values and God, and they're involved in a heroic journey to purge the satanic interests from the government and the society and restore America to its natural Christ-like standard or whatever the hell. But they believe this. This is part of their identity. It's part of who they are. So their support for Trump, and remember, coming into this, before Trump was the Trump we know today, Trump was the Trump you and I know from the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. The billionaire, playboy, transactional, revenge-seeking, scumbag, slumlord, racist predator that he's always been. A fraud, a joke. So remember that when he came into this whole world, it started with the whole Barack Obama birther thing. And that's kind of how MAGA, QAnon, right-wing, red-pilled type of people started to latch on to him, was part of that conspiracy. Obama was born in Kenya. He's not a real American. He's an other. He's different. He's not like you or me. He's got that funny name, Hussein. And that's how they latched on to Trump, because he was a part of their same heroic journey, fighting the cabal, fighting the conspiracy. He latched onto that birther thing. And then he continued with the Crooked Hillary thing. She's another part of that cabal, Crooked Hillary. And then Bill Clinton, he flew on Epstein's jet, et cetera, et cetera. So these MAGA people have built an entire worldview and an entire personality around being a part of this heroic journey to slay the evil Democrat pedophiles. And now, as they were building on that journey, there was other hucksters from the MAGA world joining it and cheerleading it to make a buck. Your Charlie Kirks and Andrew Schultzes and all the rest of these podcasters out there, Ben Shapiro's, Dan Bongino's, that whipped the audience into a frenzy about the whole Epstein files and the QAnon belief in the Democratic satanic pedophile ring. And so we got a situation here where they rode that wave of discontent, malcontent, rode this wave of conspiracy thinking into the White House twice. And now that Dan Bongino, Deputy Director of the FBI, Kash Patel, another one of the guys that was pushing that massive conspiracy, Pam Bondi has the file on her desk. I've got the file on my desk. We're looking into it right now. Here, MAGA influencers. Here's massive binders of Jeffrey Epstein, phase 1. You know, implying there's going to be a phase 2, phase 3, right? We're going to unmask the Democratic pedophile ring. So for Pam Bondi to come out, remember the former attorney general in Florida who took money from Trump to cover up his case down there that had to do with the university and the fraud he was doing down there. So she's already done a cover up for him before. She comes out and says, oh, well, there's nothing to see here. There is no Epstein list. There was no Epstein List. There's no evidence that Epstein was blackmailing anybody powerful for anything. No evidence whatsoever to suggest that any of this Epstein conspiracy stuff is true. So that's it. Close the book on that. It's all over. Don't talk about it no more. Yeah, right. Right. So we're not going to talk about it anymore because there's nothing to see here. Apparently, Ghislaine Maxwell is serving 20 years in prison for trafficking nobody to no one. Come on now. We know there were multiple victims. We know many of them have sued already, including the 13-year-old who sued and alleges that Jeffrey Epstein arranged for her to be raped by Donald Trump. But nothing to see here. Pam Bondi says it's all going to go away. There's no problem going on with Jeffrey Epstein. Well, this has caused the rift within MAGA that bigger than anything we've ever seen before. Bongino says he's going to quit, Deputy FBI Director. Kash Patel's, Kash Patel's caught like a deer in the headlights, I was going to say, but he always looks like that. That's not his fault. So they want to try to memory hole this, try to make it go away. And, of course, Donald Trump doesn't understand the Streisand effect because he comes out, the big old 400-word post. Jeffrey Epstein's a loser. Jeffrey Epstein this, Jeffrey Epstein that, Jeffrey Epstein. The whole thing was written by the Democrats. The Democrats, Obama and Crooked Hillary and Biden crime family, they all wrote the Epstein files. Oh, okay. So then release them. So there is a file then. Yeah, we can't release that. But then in the same post, he goes off about Hunter Biden's laptop. Right? Let's not talk about the past. Jeffrey Epstein, that's old news. But Hunter Biden's laptop, that was the crime of the century. Yeah. So there is a list. We have the list on our desk. Oh, but it was a list that was all put together by the Democrats. He's flailing. He's flailing at this. And the MAGA comments on his Truth Social post that had over 400 words in it, and 7 times he mentions Jeffrey Epstein, it's gotten over 45,000 comments, and 95% of them are awful. MAGA is pissed. This might be the thing that breaks them. This might be the thing that breaks them. And there's one thing in his post that he said, and I haven't heard anyone else make this comment on this. They bring up that he said Epstein all these times and the Clintons were behind it, etc. But he had one little line in there that I think is a tell. Because Trump, for all the things you can say about Trump, and while he does lie, all the time, there is a certain honesty to his lies. There's a certain, he can't help but tell on himself. He can't help but brag about things, even when it's in his best interest not to. And it's this one little line in the Truth Social post, and it went something along the lines of, why are we talking about Jeffrey Epstein, the man who never dies? Or the man who can't be killed, or something like that. I can't remember the exact line. The man who never dies. But the implication of it was, in the context that it's written, sounds like a guy who had killed Epstein and is shocked that he's still being talked about. Like, what do I got to do to kill this guy? That's the way it came off to me. So I don't know if anyone else mentioned that, but pretty amazing stuff. So we're watching all of this fall apart in real time. Latest news coming around on this is going to be opening more and more eyes, but I think it's funny as hell that they're being hoisted by their own conspiracy theory petard. And as for the MAGAs, some of the MAGAs are starting to turn, and some of these podcasters starting to try to dig themselves out. One of them is this guy, I've only heard him a couple times, Andrew Schultz. He's one of these manosphere podcasters that gave a hearty endorsement to Trump, but now has seemed to kind of changed his tune.
People that they'll DM me and be like, you see what your boy's doing? You voted for this. I'm like, I voted for none of this. He's doing the exact opposite of everything I voted for. Yeah. I want him to stop the wars. He's funding them. I want him to shrink spending, reduce the budget. He's increasing it. It's like everything that he said he's going to do, except sending immigrants back.
Yeah, funny how that worked out, Andrew. Everything except for rounding up the brown people and putting them into concentration camps. He was absolutely correct on that one. Oh, yeah. Okay, so let me get this straight, son. This guy who was president once before for an entire term during your lifetime, who during that time was documented by the Washington Post to have lied over 30,000 times when he was in office, a guy who only got to be in office because of documented and convicted fraud that he committed upon the American people through a catch and kill scheme to find stories unflattering to the candidate and make sure that they would never reach the light of day. He was doing so by having hush money payments paid and the financial records for those payments fraudulently entered to cover up the fact that he was having sex without a condom with a porn star. And that was him cheating on his girlfriend, Karen McDougal. Remember, when he was with Stormy Daniels, he also had a girlfriend, Karen McDougal, the Playboy model he was cheating on. And he was going out with her, cheating on his wife, Melania, who was still breastfeeding their son, Barron. And that was his third wife, who he was cheating with against his second wife, Marla Maples. And she was someone that he had cheated with against his first wife, Ivana. And so he's a documented cheater. He's convicted 34 times of fraud. He's lied over 30,000 times the first time he was in office. But you believed him when he said he was all about reducing the debt and not getting into wars. You believed him. Yeah. So that's what you voted for, fella. So yeah, you may have thought you were voting for no wars and reducing the deficit and other things he was saying, but who you were voting for was a documented liar. So sorry you got lied to, but welcome to the club. I think it's pretty clear to anyone who's been paying attention that the Trump maladministration is currently engaged in a campaign of ethnic cleansing. That is a war crime. We are committing ethnic cleansing by trying to round up all the brown people in America and send them to our concentration camps or to our gulags on foreign soil where they can be tortured and killed. We've had the Supreme Court rule that people can be deported, can be extradited, I should say. Those aren't the right words either. Kidnapped, trafficked is what's happening here, to countries they've never lived in before, with no guarantee that where they're going won't subject them to warfare, violence, terrorism, or torture, and with no more than 6 hours notice. The shame of the Roberts Court is probably going to outlast the shame of the Taney Court, the Dred Scott Court. What Roberts has allowed to happen with this 6-3 SCROTUS, the Supreme Court Republicans of the United States, is an abomination to the Constitution, abomination to our democracy and our rule of law. We are engaged in ethnic cleansing. There's a story I caught through my social media feed. This was on Forbes, where this is in Florida, and the Florida Highway Patrol had this guy stopped. Or he's a trucker, right? And he's trucking through a weigh station. They got him at a weigh station to weigh the truck, and they ask him for his driver's license. He's got a Florida driver's license, hands it over. And then the Florida State Trooper, goes and gets this guy from Customs and Border Protection to come on over to start talking to this Hispanic guy who's got the Florida driver's license. Well, the Hispanic guy, smart guy, calls his lawyer, and the lawyer gets on the phone with the Customs and Border Patrol guy. Lawyer asks, why is this? What's going on here? And she says, I was advised that the client looked Hispanic and had a Hispanic name. And now the Florida patrols, Florida troopers, are collaborating with ICE, Border Patrol, and they call them anytime they encounter anyone they suspect is an immigrant. And so the lawyer asks, well, would you have followed the same process if it had been me driving? And the guy responds, well, it depends if you look Hispanic. Because nobody immigrates to the United States from Russia or Australia or Africa or Asia. Nope, only brown people, only Hispanics, only people that speak Spanish immigrate to this country and overstay their visas or cross the border illegally. Only Spanish-speaking people, only brown Spanish-speaking people. Don't worry about those Russians, those Estonians, those Lithuanians that overstayed their visas. They don't look like an immigrant. Open, naked racism. And they don't even really try to hide it. This is the human thumb, Tom Homan, our Gestapo czar, head of ICE, discussing how they go about picking people up to be trafficked, kidnapped, imprisoned, sold into slavery.
Look, people need to understand, ICE officers and Border Patrol, they don't need probable cause to walk up to somebody, briefly detain them, and question them. They just need the totality of the circumstances, right? They just got through the observation, get articulable facts based on the location, the occupation, their physical appearance, their actions. Like a uniformed border patrol walks up to them at for instance, a Home Depot. And they got all these articulable facts, plus the person walks away or runs away.
Their physical appearance, their accents, the fact that they're standing at a Home Depot, or they try to get away from someone who's asking them questions while they're standing there. Clearly, criminals who must be rounded up and sent to our torture gulags. Well, a judge has ruled now on this and said that there should be no more racial profiling. He's blocked the racial profiling, which, that's great for the record books, but they're just going to keep doing it anyway. They're just going to call it something else. Reminds me of that old Saturday Night Live line from the Chevy Chase era. I don't judge a man by the color of his skin. I judge him according to the size of his nostrils. Right? So they're going to find a way to keep on doing what they're doing because that is the goal. Because that is what Stephen Miller wants. Stephen Miller was rejected by a girl at Santa Monica High School, a Hispanic girl at Santa Monica High School, and he has had that chip on his shoulder ever since that he's going to get his revenge by ridding the country of all the brown people. That is what they want to do. And for the Andrew Schultzes out there, I didn't vote for this. Well, Andrew Schultz, you did say in that little clip we played earlier, well, except for getting rid of all the immigrants. You know what you were voting for. You knew you were voting for ethnic cleansing. When they were holding up the signs that said mass deportations now, they weren't referring to just Massachusetts, right? They were talking about deporting 20 million people. They said it multiple times, 20 million people. You really believe there are 20 million gang members in the United States, that 1 out of every 15 people in this country is some sort of immigrant, Tren de Aragua, MS-13 killer gang member? No. They want to round up all the brown people. Even the folks that you like, even the guy who works at the taco truck that you get your tacos from at lunch. The scenes in L.A. now, empty taco trucks, lawnmowers still running from ICE that have come and snatched these people away, masked, unidentified thugs in unmarked vehicles, snatching people away and not telling their relatives where they've snatched them away to, moving them multiple places so that they can't be found. This is terror that's being inflicted on our people in the service of this racism that is so embedded in the United States, in our history. We made a huge mistake. I mean, this is embedded going all the way back to the founding of this country when we had to make compromises with slavers. We had to put in our Constitution that slavery, the slave trade, couldn't be abolished or even talked about for 20 years. When we first wrote the Constitution, there was a 20-year moratorium on trying to do anything about slavery to appease those slave states to join the Union. We celebrate our independence on the 4th of July. We would have celebrated our independence on the 2nd of July, but the final copy that they had of the Constitution, or the Declaration, I should say, had a clause in it decrying the institution of slavery. And so they had to spend another couple days editing that and taking that out before the slave states would sign on. And that led us to July 4th being the Declaration of Independence. We had the slave states commit an insurrection against the United States. And I refuse to call it the Civil War. I think that's some euphemistic bullshit. There's nothing civil about war. It makes it sound like we were two sides that had a spat, two sides of equal measure. No, this was a slaver insurrection. A slaver insurrection against the United States with the intent of destroying our country. And the fact that after that war was ended, that we didn't hang every Confederate general, hang every Confederate elected official, from Jefferson Davis all the way down to every legislator who signed on to the insurrection against the United States, that we did not hang those people, that we did not permanently disenfranchise every Confederate soldier, everyone who ever took arms up against the United States, that we failed to do that, is why we're in the mess we're in today. We have never taken seriously the rot of racism that runs through this country and worked to extinguish it. And the few times we've made progress on that, white people have been like, all right, good. Hey, we solved racism. Woohoo. We passed the Civil Rights Act of 1965. We're all done here. Nothing left to do here. Oh, we elected a black president. Racism is over. Woohoo. It still persists, and it is personified in Donald J. Trump. But I did want to make a point about one of the things that HOMAN said in that clip, as he started at the beginning, when he said, Border Patrol doesn't need probable cause, they just need totality of the circumstances, blah, 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 blah. And I hate to say it, but he's right. And this goes back before he was even in that position. I wrote a little piece once for High Times magazine. I think it was in 2016, maybe the December issue, called Beware the Border. The cover story, Beware the Border. And it was my investigation on the laws of the Fourth and Fifth Amendment when it comes to the border. And this happened upon the story of, I think it was Willie Nelson got busted there at Sierra Blanca. Maybe it was one of his busts or one of the other Snoop Dogg busts or something like that. But anyway, musicians traveling through West Texas would often get stopped at the Sierra Blanca Border Patrol checkpoint. And at the Border Patrol checkpoints, they don't need probable cause. Just like he said, they just need the articulable suspicion, you know, and in this case, bus smells like weed and it's a rock star. It's like, okay, I can probably search that thing, right? So they've had this power. The Border Patrol has had this power to unlock your Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights much easier than your average cop does. And it's all because of the national security in the border, right? So it's Border Patrol at these Border Patrol checkpoints, right? You'd think, okay, that's easy enough to deal with because at least you know where they are. Well, that's where it gets a little dicey, because the Border Patrol has what they call temporary permanent checkpoints. That's right. Talk about Orwellian. Temporary permanent checkpoints. And at one point, they had set up one of these temporary permanent checkpoints up in New Hampshire. Yeah, up in New Hampshire, to deal with kids coming across the border from Canada. You know, students that may have overstayed their visa and so forth. So they can set these up, and when it comes to setting up these temporary permanent checkpoints, they can be set up anywhere within 100 miles of the U.S. border. Okay, so you're thinking, all right, border with Mexico, 100 miles within the border of Mexico, that's going to include San Diego and Tucson and El Paso and Brownsville, right? Okay, so 100 miles within the southern border, sure. 100 miles on the northern border, Canada. Okay, well, then you got your, your Sandpoint, Idahos and your, Bellingham, Washingtons and some of the North Dakotas and all that. Okay, right. But the border also includes our borders with water. So you got to include 100 miles within the Pacific coastline. That's your entire I-5 corridor. That's Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles. Then you got to consider the Atlantic border. Well, that's all New York and Baltimore and Boston and, the whole, all the way down to, now you get to Atlanta, right? All of Florida, because then you got to come around the Gulf Coast too. All of the Redneck Riviera, New Orleans, Biloxi. Yeah, there is a 100-mile zone within the entire border of the contiguous United States in which Border Patrol may operate and set up these temporary permanent checkpoints at which they do not need probable cause to unlock your Fourth and Fifth Amendments. This puts 9 out of 10 of the largest cities in America within that 100-mile zone. The only one that's outside of it is Dallas, Fort Worth. It makes it so parts of, entire states are border zones. Like all of Maine and Vermont and New Hampshire and Rhode Island and Connecticut, they're entirely within that 100-mile zone, as is Hawaii. Hawaii is completely surrounded by technically a border with the Pacific Ocean. Every speck of the Hawaiian Islands is within Border Patrol's purview. As, the 100-mile border around the interior of Alaska as well, which would include Anchorage. So, this sort of overreach by our federal law enforcement officials has been going on for quite some time, since the beginnings of the so-called global war on terror and the institution of the authorization for the use of military force in 2003. And the creation of the Department of Homeland Security and ICE, and all of this has been going on for quite a while. But nobody was really paying attention to it back then because, it was just dope smoking rock stars getting busted on a tour bus being reported by some stoner in the Pacific Northwest for a pot growers magazine. All right, time to turn my attention to the Democratic Party. And for this, I wanted to take a look at a story that's happening internationally out there in the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Of course, the killing goes on, the war crimes and genocide goes on. The country of Israel has killed over 52,000 people. Oh, I'm sorry, more than 55,000 people. I misread that. Since the October 7th, 2023 attack by Hamas that killed 1,200 people. So yes, the solution to having 1,200 of your people killed by terrorists in a surprise attack on one day, the answer to that is completely obliterating the entire Gaza Strip, killing 55,000 people in response, over half of those being women and children, wounding over 127,000 people. And the reports we're getting out now of aid trucks there trying to set up food and water distribution for people who are starving, people who are dehydrated, and IDF forces taking shots at them while they're there trying to get food, trying to survive amidst the rubble. It's just terribly shocking what's going on there. And we know, of course, that Republicans aren't going to condemn this kind of stuff. It's the kind of ethnic cleansing they like. Hey, get rid of the brown people on the good land so we can build some nice hotels. Exactly what they're looking for, but I'd expect better from the Democrats. The Democrats are so loath to walk up to that line of criticizing Israel, criticizing the genocide, the ethnic cleansing, the war crimes of Benjamin Netanyahu. In fact, just recently he was in Washington, D.C., Netanyahu, the war criminal, wanted by the International Criminal Court, got warrants out for his arrest. Showed up in Washington, D.C., and there he was in the picture. Big old photograph with all sorts of current electeds there. There was Chuck Schumer and Adam Schiff and Cory Booker. Booker looked like he was trying to hide in the picture, but we could see you, Cory. All generous recipients, or recipients of generous amounts from AIPAC, the American Israel Political Action Committee, a lobbying group for Israel, which has purchased lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. Let's not kid ourselves here. They spread the money both ways, but it's really glaring how much they spread it around the Democrats. And to illustrate this, I want to talk about a story that happened not in Gaza, but on the West Bank. We forget that there's stuff going on the West Bank there, where Israeli settlers, they call them Israeli settlers, colonists is what they are, colonizing the West Bank, setting up as many, like what we did with the American Indians. We set out homesteaders. Go set up your homes out there in the land where other people are living. And in many cases, they're firebombing and kicking out the Palestinians that already live in houses, burning down their olive trees. They can take over their homes there in the West Bank to try to, again, colonize it, to try to drive the brown people out and make Israel one big nation, as was promised in some ancient fairy tale to some illiterate Hebrews, thousands of years ago. Democrats don't want to criticize what's going on there, because what happened in the West Bank was the killing of an American beaten to death by Israeli settlers. His name was Sayfollah Musallet. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Sayfollah Musallet, 21 years old, born in Florida, was visiting family in the West Bank, trying to help them out. Confrontation broke out between them, Palestinians and Israelis, and this kid was beaten to death. So, have we heard anything from Democratic politicians, from any of our senators out there, about Sayfollah Musallet? I thought for sure some Democrat out there would have to condemn the killing of an American beaten to death by an unruly mob. So we looked up various recipients of that generous AIPAC cash. Lifetime, Chuck Schumer's received $1.7 million. Senator Jackie Rosen, $1.7 million. Ron Wyden, my senator from Oregon, $1.2 million. Adam Schiff from California, $1.2 million. Dick Durbin from Illinois, $1.1 million. Kirsten Gillibrand from New York, just short of $1 million. Raphael Warnock from Georgia, $923,000. Cory Booker, there you are, from New Jersey, $871,000. Nelson of Florida, $859,000. Stabenow of Michigan, $840,000. Ossoff of Georgia, $783,000. Tammy Duckworth of Wisconsin, $782,000. Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, $769,000. I just decided to limit myself to the Democrats in the Senate who've received over $750,000 lifetime from AIPAC. I scoured their websites, their Twitter feeds, their Facebook feeds. Not one of them had anything to say about the beating death of 21-year-old Sayfollah Musallet in the West Bank. For that matter, I couldn't find many statements from anybody about this situation. So Democrats, we're going to have, pardon the expression, a come to Jesus meeting on this, about your taking of lobbying dollars from a group that is helping you or getting you to be complicit in this genocide and this colonization, this ethnic cleansing that's going on under the Netanyahu administration. And you're going to have to get on board with this, because there's been this long-standing thing in American politics of conflating criticism of Israel with criticism of Judaism and Jews, that it's anti-Semitic somehow to be against Israel, that we cannot separate the respect and tolerance of a major world religion with the one country that was designed to be an ethno-state for that one world religion. But as usual, Democrats are way behind the wave on this, way behind the sentiment on this, because for people under 40, they don't have that separation. They don't have that problem separating Israel from support of Judaism. They don't see criticizing a genocide as being anti-Semitic. And Democrats, you're going to lose that vote. You may have already lost this presidency to Trump this time because of the refusal of Kamala Harris to condemn the genocide that Joe Biden was funding and that Trump now continues to fund. It's not 1900s anymore. We're not just out of the shadow of the Holocaust and the horror of that and the Zionism and the need to have to create this Jewish ethno-state for the fear that we have to support it at all times because it's so weak and fragile and it's our only bedrock of democracy in the Middle East. We got to protect it under all circumstances. It's not that time anymore. Israel's a nuclear armed country with a very powerful military and one of the best secret intelligence services in the world. It's not weak anymore. It can take criticism now. It will survive if we criticize Benjamin Netanyahu, if we work to try to replace his administration with a better one. It's not the end of the world anymore. But once again, these Democrats, largely because of the New York delegation, are stuck fighting the battles of the 1900s. They have not woken up yet to the digital era and to the new ways of thinking. And one of the ways this is being so dramatically illustrated is in the success of Zoran Mamdani. He won a primary for mayor of a city. And yet this is the big national story on the Democratic level. How all these different donors are coming together to find some way to defeat Mamdani. How the big money interests in New York, the stockbrokers and the finance guys, all trying to coalesce to try to fight Mamdani. Andrew Cuomo saying he's going to run as an independent because, Andrew Cuomo, kind of guy that can't take no for an answer. Which is great. I'm glad he's running. He's going to split that independent vote with Adams. Great thinking, guys. Maybe Jim Clyburn could talk to them and they could all drop out and get behind Biden. So it's driving the establishment nuts because Zoran Mamdani is ahead of the curve. He's speaking to where the voters are now and where they're heading now. I made a joke the other day about how the Democratic Party, their leadership, is like a 7-year-old's soccer team. They all run to where the ball is instead of where the ball is going to be. And that's what's happening here with Mamdani. Mamdani's running to where the ball is going to be. He sees people that are sick and tired of the democratic status quo, sick and tired of the word socialism being used to demonize anything that would be good for us with our taxpayer dollars. It's never socialism. No, never decry socialism when we're bailing out banks and we're bailing out auto industry and not getting anything in return in ownership stake. I always thought when we bailed out a bank, we should become stockholders in that bank. The federal government, the U.S. taxpayers, we should become stockholders when we bail something out. We bailed out the big three automakers. We should all own stock in GM. And when they get stock dividends, we should be getting that money because we taxpayers bailed you out. We should be getting a dividend off that. But no, that kind of socialism's fine. That kind of socialism's fine for the rich. Dare think of using our taxpayer dollars to feed, clothe, or give health care to us, though. Oh, my God, socialism. And there's a great clip out now with Mamdani saying how Trump has to call him communist now because socialism isn't hitting anymore. It doesn't hit as hard anymore. It's absolutely true. Mamdani is running to where the ball is going to be. But then you get guys like Richie Torres, one of the Republican representatives in the House, they don't take this seriously.
I think it's fair to say that my colleagues in the New York congressional delegation and I, we do not care about the Democratic Socialists of America. We're focused on defeating congressional Republicans in the midterms and making Hakeem Jeffries the Speaker of the House and reversing the catastrophic consequences of the Republican reconciliation bill. We could care less about Mickey Mouse primary challenges.
Well, first of all, Representative Torres, to quote Weird Al Yankovic in the song Word Crimes, it's couldn't care less. You could care less means you could care at least a little. Mickey Mouse challengers. We don't care about the Democratic Socialists of America. They're Mickey Mouse primaries. Just dripping with condescension for all the young people who are excited about someone like Zoran Mamdani. Tell me how that works out for you, Richie. Because what I want to see is a primary for Richie Torres, and a primary for Chuck Schumer, and a primary for Kirsten Gillibrand, and a primary for all the Democratic Party. Any of you over the age of 50 ought to be primaried. And a lot of you under the age of the 50, Richie Torres, ought to be primaried as well. It's time to sweep out this old mode of Democratic thinking that casts the other side as some sort of honorable, good faith colleagues with whom we need to find bipartisan consensus, instead of the enemies of democracy that they are, the ideological heirs to the royalists, to the slavers, to the Confederates, to the Ku Klux Klan, to the Nazi sympathizers, to the Aryan nations. They're the same. They're all the same. That's what this Republican Party has become. It got taken over by its Tea Party movement and then by its Trumpist MAGA movement. They are no longer the Eisenhower Republicans. They're no longer the Nelson Rockefeller Republicans. They're no longer the Republicans that have America's best interests at heart. They just think the best way to get there is through business, not through government. No, those Republicans don't exist anymore. These are your concentration camp Republicans. These are your Dachau Republicans, your Auschwitz Republicans. They make concentration camps and then sell merch for it and take thumbs up pictures next to it. They celebrate their evil. It's time for us to treat them like the evil they are, not a opposition to be negotiated with, but an enemy to be defeated and vanquished, and to be excited about Hakeem Jeffries becoming the Speaker of the House. Look, I sure hope the Democrats win these midterms in 2026. Absolutely. But Hakeem Jeffries as the leader is not something I'm excited about. This guy couldn't fight his way out of a wet paper bag. Did you see the picture of him with the bat? We get a stand tough against Donald Trump and someone takes a picture of him, a bat, looks like a kid waiting to get picked up from Little League, took the picture from above, making the guy look small. It's just everything could possibly be wrong with the picture was wrong with that picture. And Jeffries, with this rise of Mamdani, here we have the guy, he won the Democratic primary. So where's all the vote blue no matter who people, right? You know, when we were all excited about Bernie Sanders and then he lost and Hillary Clinton was the nominee and they all said, you know, yes, we had a grueling primary, but Hillary won. So get on board, vote blue no matter who. Same thing happened in 2020 with, you know, here comes Bernie Sanders again, filling arenas and winning primaries, and everybody got out on Clyburn's urging and got behind Biden, made him the nominee. And what did we hear? Oh, you know, time to put those primaries behind us. He's the nominee. You got to vote blue no matter who. Yeah, it doesn't seem to work like that when someone on the left wins those primaries, does it? We can't get a full-throated endorsement from Hakeem Jeffries or Chuck Schumer, any of these Democratic politicians. Well, I don't know. He's got a lot of questions. He won't condemn globalize the intifada. That's terrible things that other people say that he's never said. Oh, my gosh. Hakeem Jeffries there. They were asking about Mamdani coming up and all this. And one of his quotes, he called it team gentrification. So here is what Jeffries is trying to do here. See, Andrew Cuomo, a lot of his base comes from black voters. And so Jeffries here is trying to play this little game like, see, black folks, how Mamdani, he's really a tool of Whitey. He's a tool of Whitey coming in and messing up your neighborhoods and making them too expensive for you to live in anymore. Playing a race card, are we, Hakeem? Okay, we'll see how that plays out. So Hakeem Jeffries, boy, he's team gentrification. Real quick, when it's someone on the left, cast aspersions, raise doubts. But when it's something happening on the right, something that's in genuine need of condemnation, here's what we get from Hakeem Jeffries. We're talking about these floods that happened. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in my Republican segment coming up. But these terrible floods where there wasn't warning systems, the Republicans in charge of Kerr County there rejecting Biden money. We don't want none of that there communist Biden money for some sort of alarm or system. We don't take that communist money. Rejecting money, free money from the government to be able to set up something to help save people's lives. And then we get the slow walk response from FEMA. We get the news coming out that Kristi Noem, canceled the calls and calls weren't getting answered and so forth, right? So all these things that point to, quite obviously, Republican mismanagement, Republican malfeasance, things that ought to be roundly and sharply and directly criticized. And so when Hakeem Jeffries was asked about all this stuff going on in the floods in Texas, here's what he had to say. Quote, I think we are going to have to figure out what happened. Why did it happen? And how do we prevent this type of tragedy from ever happening again? And so the question of readiness is certainly something that Congress should be able to explore in a bipartisan way, particularly as we head into the summer where we can expect intensifying extreme weather events. End quote. Questions. This guy's asking questions. Gosh, something terrible happened here. We should find out who did it. I wonder how it could have been avoided. We know who did it. Republicans. Say it. Say their name. Republicans mismanaged emergency response. Republicans refused to try to help prevent this tragedy. Republicans, when Republicans get in office, they don't care about you. Here's what you could have said. You could have said, Donald Trump's crusade to defund our government, to line the pockets of his billionaire buddies, cost the lives of innocent little girls drowned at a summer camp. Trump and his unequipped, unprepared, unserious crew of Fox News hosts will get more people killed because they don't care about you. That's how you respond to something like this. That's what they would have said if Biden was president and had dropped the ball like this. But of course, Biden and the Democrats wouldn't, because Democrats actually govern well. They're shitty at politics, but they actually govern well. And I got this from Brian Beutler and his newsletter, and he writes, don't fight your opponent, portray yourself as a consensus builder, and a grateful public will reward you. It's a horrible defect in democratic thinking, and outside energy needs to be put into changing that. New frontiers of policy, moderate or progressive, will only open when more democratic leaders understand the political value of showing real resolve. Yes, absolutely. Right there in Jeffries' quote, Congress should be able to explore in a bipartisan way how we can deal with intensifying extreme weather events. Can't even say climate change there, which is what causes the extreme weather events. Climate change that makes the air be able to hold more moisture so that when the rains come, they're bigger rains, more voluminous rains that cause these kind of flash floods. And climate change exacerbated by the Republican Party that refuses to get behind renewables, that's right now canceling EV credits, canceling solar credits, canceling wind credits, funding and subsidizing coal and oil. Call the opponent by their name, demonize them, make a villain in this story. There has to be a villain. You have to be the hero going on the heroic journey to conquer the villain, to to end the evil. Why can't Hakeem Jeffries and Democrats understand this? Zoran Mamdani understands this. AOC understands this. Maxwell Frost understands this. Jasmine Crockett understands this. Just to name a few, because there's only a few. Politics is warfare by other means. It's time to start calling Republicans the enemy, and it's time to start identifying the evils that they commit and the results of their policies. We get this every time with them say, don't politicize the tragedy. You can't politicize the tragedy. You're trying to politicize the tragedy. Well, when your politics cause the tragedy, it can't help but be politicized. When one side does the things that cause the tragedy, it can't help but be political. And to not politicize it is, ironically, politicizing it. By trying to not set some blame, by trying to say there is a bipartisan solution, you are politicizing it by helping the Republicans avoid any sort of accountability. All right, now time to look at the Republican side of the aisle. And this week there are a lot of anniversaries, one of which was the one-year anniversary of the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, by Thomas Matthew Crooks. Interesting how we don't hear much about his name or know a whole lot about him, huh? And we learned all sorts of things about John Hinckley back in the 1980s when he tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan. Unsuccessful attempt there, and we knew the guy's name. His photograph was plastered everywhere. We knew that he loved Jodie Foster. He was trying to impress Jodie Foster, blah, 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 blah. We knew all about this guy. Haven't heard a whole lot about Thomas Matthew Crooks, have we? Yeah, apparently this 20-year-old right-wing loner type, highly intelligent according to what I was reading about the kid, managed to just sneak his way, during a presidential event, managed to sneak his way onto a sniper platform on a roof with a perfect position to be able to fire at the then presidential candidate, and was apparently spotted by Secret Service before he had ever taken any shots. They had seen the guy. So, and of course he was, killed by Secret Service, shot in the head, and his body disposed of and cremated without people being able to get in touch with it. There are all sorts of questions around this thing as to whether or not, it's a little shady about what happened. Guy gets shot at, presidential candidate gets shot at, and then the Secret Service allows him to stand up and pump his fist. Just happens to be a photographer right there to take an iconic photograph of the guy. Shot in the ear, allegedly, but now we see all sorts of pictures of him, very high-resolution, close-up pictures of that ear, and we don't seem to see any damage or scar tissue whatsoever. Interesting, that. And MAGA, of course, they like to look at this assassination attempt as divine providence. God spared Donald Trump to align America with the Christian values. God spared Donald Trump. Of course, God had to take out that Compatore guy, the firefighter. God had to kill him. He had to be sacrificed to Donald Trump, I guess. That's how their God works, I suppose. The firefighter with the kids who are now left fatherless, he had to die so that the guy with the 3 baby mamas and the 5 kids, and so he could live, right? That's how that works. So yeah, we had that anniversary, and I don't know. My lady love is fully behind the conspiracy theory that this was all a setup. It's tough for me to get on board with it, despite all the questions, just because I'm skeptical of any conspiracy theory, right? Because okay, so what's the conspiracy theory that we're going to let the Secret Service is going to let this kid get on the roof and try and fake shoot the president, have shots ring out, but not actually kill him? Okay, well, if you're going to fake an assassination attempt, why not do that with blanks? Why would you have actual bullets flying if you're faking the assassination attempt? The other conspiracy might be that maybe the Secret Service wanted him killed. and allowed the kid to get up there and was hoping that he was a better marksman. That would be more of a conspiracy theory I could get behind, that it was a conspiracy to actually kill him that didn't go as planned because the kid was a bad shot. That makes a little more sense to me than we're going to get this kid and let him get up there to take shots but not hit the president. I don't know. That doesn't pass for me. The blood on his ear, people have talked about that's a kayfabe. That's like a wrestling trick where you take a little razor and you nick your ear so the blood will come out, you know. Maybe, I don't know, but I'm more likely to believe there actually was bullets flying, that one came really close to him. And, you know, I don't even think the bullet would necessarily have to hit if it was close enough, going at, you know, supersonic speeds like it is, or I don't know if it's super. Yeah, I guess it's supersonic. Just the air, you know, ripping through the air could maybe, you know, cause a little bit of a cut. Still, I'd like to see a much better picture of the guy's ear. I would like to, you know, if it were me and people were coming to these conspiracy theories that I faked my own assassination, I'd be like, you know, let's do a special, you know, come on, look with a microscope at my ear. Here's where you can see the scar tissue. But kind of like the Epstein List, I guess, you know, you don't want people to be looking too close at some of these things. Other Republican news I've got to get to, the pending divorce of Ken Paxton, the Texas Attorney General. If you haven't followed this guy, Mr. Corruption, been busted and tried, and all sorts of political shenanigans have gone on to be able to keep him in his job. But the guy's a crook. The guy's just terrible. Well, apparently now his wife is divorcing him, and the post that she puts out said that she had to divorce him on biblical grounds. Biblical grounds for divorce. And so that got me questioning, what are the biblical grounds for divorce? So I looked it up, because you know me, I look shit up. And according to the Gospel of Matthew 5:32 says, "But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery." Matthew 19:9, "As I say to you, whoever divorces a wife except for sexual immorality." So basically sexual immorality, right, is the biblical divorce reason. So what is considered sexually immoral? Well, this is where we get down to the translations of the Bible, right? In the Greek translation of the Bible that we get the later translations from, the Greek word they use for sexual immorality is porneia, you know, the root word of pornography, right? Porneia, which is a broader term than moikia or moikia. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce Greek. Moikia. The term moikia means adultery, specifically adultery. Porneia is a broader term than moikia. Porneia encompasses various forms of sexual immorality, such as prostitution, incest, or bestiality. So, divorcing Ken Paxton on biblical grounds includes sexual immorality. Sexual immorality could be prostitution, incest, or bestiality. So many people are asking questions. Did Ken Paxton fuck a goat? Other Republicans I got to get to here. There's a guy, Representative Randy Fine. A terrible misnomer there. This guy needs to be censured, and of course he won't because he's Republican. But Ilhan Omar, you know her, she's a representative from Minnesota and, you know, famously Muslim. She wears a Muslim garb in Congress. So Ilhan Omar had tweeted regarding the war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu being brought to Congress. She had tweeted, quote, "This is Benjamin Netanyahu's third visit to D.C. this year. War criminals should not be welcomed by any president or Congress. He should be held accountable for his crimes, not platformed beyond shameful." Okay, that's her statement. Congressman Randy Fine replied, quote, I'm sure it is difficult to see us welcome the killer of so many of your fellow Muslim terrorists. The only shame is that you serve in Congress. Wow. Your fellow Muslim terrorists. So there's so much to unpack there. First of all, that Benjamin Netanyahu is wiping out Palestinians in Gaza, and he considers all of them Muslim terrorists. And that Ilhan Omar, because she is Muslim as well, must also be a terrorist. And that's how these guys see the world. The Congressman Randy Fines of the world really think all the Muslims are terrorists and all the terrorists are Muslims. So we just need to wipe them all out. And this is the kind of person Hakeem Jeffries wants to seek some sort of bipartisan consensus with. Again, name the enemies and call them out. Other Republicans making news. Kristi Noem. We said we were going to talk about Kristi Noem. Now with 6 cosplay action figure outfits. Kristi Noem went on to the Sunday shows to talk about what's going on in Texas and the floods that happened there and how FEMA's response has gotten people killed. Specifically, was talking about the contracts. Apparently, there were the New York Times reports that there's this call centers, the FEMA call centers. They take the calls from the people that are experiencing the emergency. And the first day of the floods, they answered most of the calls, no problem. But the second day happened to be the day that the contracts ended for this call center, and they let all these people go at the call center. So for the next 2 days, thousands and thousands of calls to FEMA went unanswered. Like only 15% of the calls got answered. And this is how Kristi Noem responded to it.
Why did it take so long to extend those contracts?
It's just false. Those contracts were in place. Nobody,
it didn't take 5 days?
No employees were off of work. Every one of them was answering calls. So false reporting, fake news.
Yeah, I hear a whole lot of weasel words in there. Contract was in place. Okay, so there was a contract. Was it funded? Was the funding in place for that contract? Everybody there was at work, was answering calls. Okay, so all the people who were hired at that time did show up to work, but were there some that did not show because the contract for them was no longer funded? Sounds pretty weaselly.
It's discouraging that during this time when we have such a loss of life and so many people's lives have turned upside down, that people are playing politics with this.
They told you, there it is. We're playing politics. When somebody's policies and one particular political party is completely in charge and terrible things happen due to the policies of that political party that holds complete power, don't go politicizing things.
Only 15% were answered on July 7th, several days after the floods.
These contracts were in place and those people were in those call centers and they were picking up the phone and answering these calls from these individuals. So that report needs to be validified. I'm not certain it's accurate, and I'm not sure where it came from. And the individuals who are giving you information out of FEMA, I'd love to have them put their names behind it, because the anonymous attacks to politicize this situation is completely wrong.
Yeah, we better get right to validifying that. Yeah, validifying. Yeah, I'm sure you would like the names of the people giving that information so you could fire them, so that you run them out on a rail so that you could ruin their careers. I'm sure that's exactly what you would like. But again, weasel words. Contracts were in place and people were at desks answering phones does not address the fact that only 15% of the calls were getting answered. Even best case scenario, if you're saying all the contracts were in place and all the people were there, you didn't have enough people.
These emergencies need to be conducted exactly how President Trump handled this one. It was that the local responders are the ones who execute the response. The state comes in and manages it, and then the federal government comes in and supports it.
Well, that's got to get you feeling better, doesn't it? Every emergency should be handled like Donald Trump handled this one, where a bunch of young girls drowned and died, where over 100 people died, where people didn't get proper notice, where phone calls weren't being answered, where FEMA wasn't on the ground immediately. That's how you want all the rest of the emergencies for the next 3.5 years to be handled, Kristi Noem? Okay, one other Republican I've got to get to before we close the door on this segment. Brooke Rollins, Secretary of Agriculture, I believe. Yeah, so she had this to say regarding all of the immigrants who are being rounded up by our ICE Gestapo just for looking Hispanic.
There will be no amnesty. The mass deportations continue, but in a strategic way, and we move the workforce towards automation and 100% American participation, which again, with 34 million people, able-bodied adults on Medicaid, we should be able to do that fairly quickly. Thank you.
Okay, so let's get this straight. We're going to keep rounding up all of the short, experienced, hard-working immigrants who pick tomatoes, which, by the way, I got some stats on this the other day from my social media feed from a woman who's a former farm worker. She points out that an experienced immigrant farm worker picking tomatoes can pick 650 pounds of tomatoes per hour. 650 pounds of tomatoes per hour. Now, let's say they're a little below average. Let's say they can only pick 600 pounds, not 650. Let's say it's 600 pounds an hour, just so I can do the math in my head a little easier. 600 pounds an hour works out to, 10 pounds a minute? 10 pounds a minute works out to a pound every 6 seconds, or a half pound every 3 seconds. A tomato weighs about half pound, you could say. So a tomato every 3 seconds for 10 hours a day. Right. So we're gonna get rid of those folks who do that kind of work, and we're gonna replace them all with automation and able-bodied Medicaid recipients. Okay. So automation. First of all, a lot of these jobs can't be automated. That's the very reason why we have human beings out there picking the things, because the automated things, they destroy a tomato or a strawberry or whatever. The automation's not going to work there. You have to have human beings. So, okay, we got these 30 million or so on Medicaid who are able-bodied. So in order to receive their health care, they're going to be forced to labor in the fields to pick these tomatoes. So you're going to take the 5'2", 30-year-old immigrant with 15 years of experience, and you're going to put me out there. You put my 6 foot, 210-pound, white-skinned body out there in the hot sun in the fields, thinking I can pick a tomato every 3 seconds. Because I'm able-bodied on Medicaid. Never mind my fake knee and my surgically repaired feet and my surgically repaired hands. I'm sure there'll be no decline whatsoever in the quality, consistency, and availability of American produce. Let's turn our attention to the states now, and in particular out here in the West, where we've gotten a report from Los Angeles from their crime statistics that are showing that L.A. is on pace to have the fewest homicides recorded in over 60 years. Murders are drastically down since about 2001. And not just in Los Angeles, but if you start looking at the major cities in America, Baltimore, New York, Detroit, Philadelphia, etc., Chicago, start looking through their crime statistics, and you're going to find that crime is at some of the lowest rates ever recorded. Violent crime, property crime, I think there was a slight uptick in auto thefts, maybe, but pretty much crime is down, which totally flies in the face of the America, especially the view of American cities that is painted by Donald Trump and the MAGA movement day after day. They really believe that Minneapolis and Los Angeles and Portland and all these major cities have been in a constant state of riot and fire and burning since George Floyd's murder. They really think that the cities now are disgusting, garbage-strewn lawless hellholes. And the statistics are showing nothing could be further from the truth. The cities have gotten safer and safer. But one of the reasons why people continue to believe that is because there's an entire information ecosystem that exists now that's walled off from reality. An entire information ecosystem of Fox News and Newsmax and OAN and right-wing talk radio and evangelical megachurches, where there's an entire subset of Americans, some 30-40% of Americans, who do not get reality. They do not get statistics like murders in L.A. at their lowest rate in 60 years. They get L.A. is being terrorized by criminal Antifa, anti-ICE thugs that are throwing bricks at cars and resisting the phalanxes of ICE agents trying to round up farmers at a cannabis farm and ending up killing one of them, right? That news, that's the news they get. I do a lot of deliveries in my day work. You know me, I'm a hobbyist podcaster, so I have to find ways to pay the bills. And one of those is deliveries. I take groceries to people. And it's kind of fulfilling in a lot of ways because, sometimes I'm delivering to, single moms who, they can't get out of the house, taking care of the kids, or disabled people. I deliver to a lot of disabled people. That's really fulfilling. And I deliver to a lot of old people, a lot of old folks that can't get out of the house. And guess what's on the television every time I'm asked to bring in groceries to their house? These nice retired folks, some of them got little veteran flags in their lawn. Not all of them are Trump supporters. Some of them are, but I don't see overt political stuff at a lot of their homes. But boy, that Fox News is on every time I go in. And if you haven't watched Fox News, if you haven't plugged into that information ecosystem, do it sometime. You ought to do it once a month at least, just to see what they're up to over there. You'll be stunned. You'll be amazed at the alternate reality they live in. So as we move forward, trying to return America to progress, to a more perfect union, as we move forward, we're going to have to address this massive information ecosystem they live in. And sometimes, I hear, well, we need to create that on our side. We need to have, the Fox News of the right. Or we need to have that on the left. We need to have our left Joe Rogan and podcasters and all of that. Yeah, we do. We need to have media apparatus that works better for the progressive message. Absolutely. But I really think that reality itself has a liberal bias. Reality has a progressive bias. We don't have to go out of our way to create a politicized news media apparatus on the left. We just need to return the news media to being the neutral arbiter of reality and facts, and that will naturally work out to fostering progressive change. I mean, to get back to journalism, think of Walter Cronkite in the Vietnam War. Being objective, not being liberal, not being conservative, but Walter Cronkite, having gone to Vietnam and having come back and seeing the stalemate that everyone was involved in and all of the pressures that were pushing toward that stalemate, recognized that the Vietnam War was lost and said so. We get actual journalists that are calling it like they see it, rather than waiting for someone to have said something so they can say that person said it. Get the news media back to being news. And I hear sometimes people say it's the fairness doctrine. We need to get back to the fairness doctrine that was abolished under Ronald Reagan. But remember, the fairness doctrine only applied to broadcast media because it's that weird little quirk of our laws that the airwaves, the electromagnetic spectrum, is owned by the public, and so therefore the public airwaves are licensed by the FCC, and then there's rules with the FCC can establish with your broadcast license, and some of that used to be a fairness doctrine that you had to provide in, opposing viewpoints kind of thing. That would only apply to ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox over the air. It wouldn't do a thing to fix Fox News, the cable channel, because inexplicably The cabling, the physical media of wires that we send electronic signals through, that isn't owned by the public. The airwaves we send digital signals through, that can be controlled by the FCC. But if we take those same digital signals and we put them as electric impulses on a piece of copper or video pulses on a piece of fiber optic, then the rules don't apply and they're all private and we can't do it. The government can't do a thing about it. It's time to change that outmoded thinking. It's time to start regulating cable, any distribution of media, of data, of information. It's time to start treating that like a utility, like electricity, like water, where there is public control and oversight of that. A lot of our problems with data privacy, with phishing, with malicious intent, and so many things that could be addressed if we just decided to treat the data spectrum, the sending and transmitting of data, of information, under the same umbrella we put the sending of signals through airwaves. You know that country baseline means it's time for our Boycott Idaho segment, where I explain to you all the reasons why you should avoid the handmade state. Now with 72 reasons. You can find them all at radicalruss.com/Idaho. Don't spend your money in Idaho, and if you can do so, avoid potatoes, because Idaho loves their potatoes. No red state is more singularly associated with one product than Idaho and the potato. They even brag about it on their license plates. Boycott Idaho, boycott the potato. And today for Boycott Idaho, we're going to talk about something that Idaho is definitely a part of, but there's many other red states that are a part of this. And it comes to me through this article in ProPublica and the news that the governor of Missouri has just signed into law a repeal of that state's initiative, where the citizens put an initiative on the ballot to create employee sick leave requirement, that you get paid employee sick leave, and pegged the state's minimum wage to inflation. So there'd be a cost of living adjustment. The minimum wage could go up as inflation goes up. The voters of Missouri put this on the ballot. They had to gather signatures, put it on the ballot. It passed in Missouri. But the Republicans come in and said, nope, screw you guys. We don't care what you think. We're repealing that. And that has happened also in Missouri with respect to making abortion legal again. After the Dobbs decision, and Missouri went ahead and criminalized abortion, people went and got the signatures, put it on the ballot, and made abortion legal again. And the Missouri legislature said, no, you silly citizens, you don't know what you're doing. This has happened in Alaska and Nebraska. Both states passed sick leave benefits. Both states' Republican legislators moved to roll them back. Arizona, another state that tried to put abortion access back into the law, their legislators pushing back on that. Florida, Utah, Montana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Arizona, Ohio, North Dakota, and South Dakota, all approving efforts to further restrict the citizen-led ballot initiative process, or they're considering doing so, trying to make it harder to get stuff on the ballot. Florida, for example, they have, and understand in Florida, you already can only do constitutional amendments. You can't do initiatives. And in Florida, the amendment has to pass with 60% of the vote. Now, most recently, they tried to increase abortion access in Florida and to legalize recreational marijuana in Florida. Both of those measures failed, but they did get over a majority vote. They just didn't reach the 60% threshold. The marijuana one was like 57%. That's not tough enough. So Florida now is trying to go even farther in reducing people's ability to make the ballot. And this is where Idaho comes in, because I have the most experience with Idaho on this. And before we get too deep in this, understand not every state has the initiative power. There's a group out there called the Initiative and Referendum Institute. I think they're at INDRinstitute.com or .org maybe. I'm not sure. They've got the list of all the states that have the initiative power. This is something that happened during the progressive movement of the early 20th century, where some of these states already had initiatives in their constitution. Others added the initiative to their constitution. State of Idaho was one of them. The early 1900s, there's this movement to have citizen-led initiatives where the elected officials would not respond to the will of the people. The people could put something on the ballot and make a law for themselves. It varies from state to state. Some states only allow initiatives. That is, you can write a law. But the case with an initiative that writes a law is laws can be repealed or amended. And that's what's happening in a lot of these states that we're talking about, where they pass an initiative that's a new law, but then the legislature comes in, like Missouri's, and undoes that law. Other states allow you to do constitutional amendments. Now, the constitutional amendment process, that protects the initiative from being attacked by the legislature because it's in the Constitution. It outranks laws, right? You can't make a law to make something unconstitutional, right? You can only amend the Constitution. And that's the case of how they did marijuana in Colorado. It was a constitutional amendment there. But even when you try constitutional amendments, they'll find ways to short-circuit them. In the case of South Dakota, the people of South Dakota passed a constitutional amendment legalizing marijuana. And then their Supreme Court came back and said, oh, no, that's unconstitutional because you broke the single subject rule that says that an amendment can only deal with one subject. And your amendment legalizing marijuana legalized possession and sales. Like, how are you supposed to legalize marijuana if you don't have a place to get it? Never mind. It legalized possession and sales, so it's unconstitutional. See, a similar kind of thing happened in Nebraska, by the way. They had a initiative that they went forth with that was going to legalize sales and supply or possession. And single subject rule came up, and they said, no, it violates single subject. So Nebraska came back the next time and said, we'll just do a constitutional amendment that says people can have medical marijuana. And then let the legislature figure out how that happens. They're still working on that. But in the state of Idaho, we had a similar situation. They hate citizen initiatives. Republicans in general, Idahoans in specific, hate citizen initiatives because citizens come back and pass things that Republicans and their donors don't like. In the state of Idaho, it was Medicaid expansion. And a bunch of other red states did this too. Medicaid expansion. Basically, the government's got all this free Medicaid money that it wants to hand out to the states, no strings attached, but you have to accept it. And these Republican legislatures are like, we don't want none of that Biden communist money. Well, the people of Idaho, through a group called Reclaim Idaho, put together a citizens initiative, got it on the ballot, and passed it with like 62%. Like it was a huge. And we're talking red state Idaho. So they go and pass this initiative that got the Medicaid expansion, which actually paid for my fake knee. Thank you, Reclaim Idaho. But the big fear in Idaho has been us marijuana legalizers, that the big money marijuana interests would come in and pass an initiative that legalized medical marijuana or recreational marijuana. So that's been the bugaboo. That's been the boogeyman. That's been the fear in the state of Idaho all these years. So just a little history on Idaho messing with the initiative process. The first initiative process, when it was first established in the 1900s, said that you had to get the signatures of 6% of Idaho's voters, as tallied from the last gubernatorial election. 6% of the voters have to sign a petition to say this goes up on the ballot. And then if it passes with a majority, it becomes law. Well, that became a problem for the Republicans because they thought, you could just sit in Boise, where all those hippie liberals live, and collect 6% signatures. So the legislature came up with this rule, this law for signature gathering that said not only did you have to collect 6% of the signatures of all the voters statewide, you've also got to collect 6% of the signatures of each one of the 44 counties in at least half of them. The idea here was you'd have to get buy-in from the rural areas. You'd have to go out to every county, or at least half of the counties, and get buy-in. And there's only like 5 or 6 big counties in Idaho population-wise. So if you had to go to at least 22 of them, you'd be getting buy-in from the rural counties. So this was the situation. They made it a little tougher to get the signatures. Well, there turned out to be a problem with this county signature gathering rule. A group that was trying to get something on the ballot sued over this, saying that it violates the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. Basically, the idea that one man, one vote, that everybody's vote is equal, right? And they argued that the county scheme violated one man, one vote because counties are all different sizes. So getting 6% in a small county is easier to get than to get 6% in a big county. So say you got one county that's 100 people, another county that's 100,000 people, just to use easy numbers. 6% of the 100 county is 6. You got to get 6 signatures. 6% of the 100,000 county is 6,000 signatures, okay? So when I get one signature from the small county, I'm 1/6 of my way to the goal. But if I get one signature in the big county, I'm only 1/6,000th of the way to my goal. In other words, a signature I get in small county is worth 1,000 times more to my time and effort than getting one signature out of big county. In essence, what that county rule did was make it so that small county signatures are bigger than big county signatures. It valued a rural signature more than it valued an urban signature and was therefore declared unconstitutional. Well, the legislature didn't sit on that for very long. They soon came up with a new standard, which was, okay, you don't have to get in half the counties 6%. You have to get half the legislative districts 6%. Now, legislative districts in the state of Idaho are set up on a relative population basis. They're close to the same size, which means one district in Boise might be, 16 square blocks of the city, and one district in central Idaho could be the entire freaking 3-county area because there's so few people there. But you add them all up, and all the people in that 3-county area is as many people as 16 square blocks in Boise. So that got around the unconstitutional part. Every vote, every signature you gather is worth roughly the same amount. The only problem for them, from their point of view, though, is it didn't really solve the issue of gathering all your signatures in a city. Because there are 14 districts within the Boise-Nampa-Caldwell Metroplex, and another 4 or so districts over there in the Pocatello, Idaho Falls area. And so between 2 major metro areas, you could collect 18 districts worth of 6%. 18 out of 35 districts is your majority there. So you're still in the situation where it makes more sense to gather signatures in the urban areas than it would be to go out to the rural areas. So it didn't solve the problem of city folk voting for liberal shit that the Republicans wanted to put a roadblock in front of. But it did create an extra roadblock, at least, because you still have to gather all those signatures from the different districts. And just to make this a little bit more of a paperwork nightmare, signatures must be gathered on a county-by-county basis. Yeah. So when I go out gathering signatures, I have to have an Ada County sheet, and a Canyon County sheet, and a Payette County sheet, and an Adams County sheet. I have to have 35 different sheets. 44 different sheets for all the 44 different counties that someone could possibly be from when they come to sign my initiative. But when I'm turning these into the county clerk, when I turn into the Ada County clerk a whole bunch of signatures, they then have to take the time to figure out which district within Ada County did that signature come from to figure out if we got the 35 district, the 18 out of 35 districts covered. So, yeah, talk about a logistics nightmare when you're trying to gather signatures, keeping track of all the different districts and all the different counties. It's a nightmare. Trust me, I've lived it. But that still wasn't enough of a roadblock for the Idaho legislature, because we kept coming back trying to pass medical marijuana initiatives, and we went and passed the Reclaim Idaho initiative. So throughout the legislative sessions over the past decade or so, they have tried various measures. One measure they tried was to increase the signature gathering to all 35 districts. Every district, you have to collect at least 6% from each district in the state of Idaho. Well, the problem with this is it allows one district to have veto power. You could go to 34 districts, get all 6%, and then you go out to one rural Mormon district that are religiously opposed to whatever you're doing, and you can't get enough signatures. They've effectively vetoed your initiative from being able to make the ballot, and the Idaho Supreme Court has already deemed that unconstitutional, with similar logic to how they banned the whole county-by-county thing. Now you're giving one rural district, disproportionate power to eliminate an entire initiative and overrule the entire rest of the state. So, because the Idaho Supreme Court declared the all 35 district thing unconstitutional, the Idaho legislature decided to try it again. Yeah, literally the same exact bill and language. They tried again, even though it's already been declared unconstitutional. And they've tried other things. They tried to increase the threshold from 6% to 10%. They've tried to decrease the amount of time you gather signatures from 180 days to 60 days, or from 18 months to 180 days, from 180 days to 60 days. They've done all sorts of things to try to stop people from collecting signatures to put things on the ballot in the state of Idaho. And in one case, they even tried to write a bill specifically to stop me from gathering signatures. Me and some of my fans. So, Idaho, we got a special situation going on where the city of Ontario lies on the Idaho border, just down I-84 from Boise, Nampa, and Meridian. So this metroplex of about 850,000 people in southwest Idaho all travel to Ontario to buy their weed and then cross the line and come back with it. Ontario, the city of 11,000 people, has a dozen marijuana dispensaries. It's got more than one dispensary for every 1,000 people that live there. And those dispensaries are selling $8 to $9 million of marijuana every month. Every single month. And the city of Ontario gets 3% of that, so it's about $250,000 a month Ontario makes on pot tax. So I saw this opportunity. I said, wait a minute. Look at all these people from Idaho coming to buy marijuana. I bet they'd like to sign a petition. So I set up signature gathering stations at the dispensaries over there in Ontario. And it was really enlightening, because not only was I getting a lot of signatures, but since we have to collect the signatures county by county, I had a different sheet for every county, I got a real good look at where people were coming from to buy legal weed in Ontario. And folks, it wasn't just Boise, Nampa, and Meridian. I had people coming from Twin Falls, from Pocatello, from Idaho Falls, from Driggs, like on the Wyoming border. People coming from the Wyoming border to cross the entirety of 300 miles across southern Idaho to get to the Oregon border just to buy legal weed. And I often thought to myself, what, they don't have weed dealers in Pocatello? They don't have weed dealers in Driggs? Well, sure they do, but people would rather buy legally. People would rather have a legal product if they can get it. So, because I was gathering signatures there in Ontario, they actually proposed a bill that would require any signature on an Idaho petition must be signed on Idaho soil. Yeah, so like your rights, your voting rights, your initiative rights as an Idahoan expire when you leave the state of Idaho. You no longer have any say over the laws of the state of Idaho if you leave the state. That's what they did. They did that to try to stop me from gathering signatures at the pot shops on the border, until I went to one of the legislative sessions and I testified. I said, this is a very interesting bill you've come up with here. Did you really intend to disenfranchise every Mormon missionary? Every Mormon missionary that's currently overseas, different country, can no longer sign an initiative. How about all those Idaho National Guard that are called up to serve in Afghanistan? They no longer have the right to sign an initiative. Or businessmen from, say, Boise Cascade or Micron that are over in, say, Canada or Taiwan, they can't sign initiatives anymore. Yeah, that kind of put a monkey wrench in their little plan, and they tried to rearrange some of the language to make it so that it'd be exempt for all those people, but not me. It never went anywhere. I think it got stalled out and never made it to vote. But I was rather flattered that the state of Idaho tried so hard to stop me from gathering signatures. But it just goes to show that it's not just Idaho, it's Missouri, it's all these other states that I mentioned that hate the citizen initiative process, which just leads me to believe we need more of it, not just in every state, but also at the national level. Imagine if we had the citizen recall ability, like we could recall Trump. All these MAG out here saying, I didn't vote for this, I didn't vote for this. Wouldn't it be cool if we could get them all to sign something that says, yes, let's hold a new election. Let's recall this son of a bitch. Let's get him out of here. Because apparently the founders and their plan that impeachment would be the ultimate remedy because all of these competing interests would have their own power at heart to protect their own interests. Well, that didn't work. The presidency managed to buy out the Congress and the Supreme Court. The three branches don't work anymore. It's time to empower the fourth branch of government, the citizens themselves, to take direct action, to be able to pass their own initiatives, to be able to set their own federal laws, and to be able to recall federal officers. Today in the Radical Rant, I want to talk about how to fix America, because, boy, America needs some fixing. We're coming up on our semi-quincentennial, the 250th birthday of this country, and after 250 years of wear and tear, I think it's time for us to address many of the flaws and faults that we have found in our constitutional order, many of them laid bare by the maladministration of Trump twice, showing us that so much of our government was built on norms and traditions and people of good faith obeying those rules. Trump and Mitch McConnell have shown us that that is no longer the case. And there's many parts of our Constitution, I think, that are need re-evaluation, rewriting. We should call a constitutional convention. We have this ability, Article 5 Constitutional Convention, and for years it was brought about by the right wing, wanting to have a constitutional convention to make abortion illegal and turn America into a Christian theocracy, yada, yada, yada. And those of us on the left have always avoided the whole mention of the Constitutional Convention because, oh my God, can you imagine what would happen if we had a Constitutional Convention? They would throw the doors open to unlimited corruption and religious rule and rolling back the rights of women and minorities and you know, what's happening now? Like, all the arguments that I ever heard as to why we should not have a constitutional convention is because the conservatives would all rally around. They'd all have a plan to rally around to fix the Constitution in such a way that installs their permanent theocratic, technocratic business oligarchy rule. Well, it's happening now anyway. So what's to fear from a constitutional convention at this point? And I've always worried that this fear of the Constitutional Convention was built on this inferiority complex we have on the left of thinking that America is somehow a center-right country and that we can't talk people into our points of view, when in fact, most of our points of view on the left are supported by not just majorities, but super majorities of the American people. Just about any issue you can name. So I think it's time to dispense with the fear of the Constitutional Convention. And I think we should have this Constitutional Convention and decide what we want this country to be like in the modern world. We've got so many of these Supreme Court decisions and precedents that have been handed down from the 1700s, the 1800s, the 1900s that do not apply anymore in a connected digital type of world. So, here are my suggestions. How we can fix America in a constitutional convention. I put this stuff out here not because I think it's possible. I could sit here and tell you how each one of these things is impossible. How it can never happen, never going to happen in America in my lifetime. That would be the easy thing to do. But I think the hard thing to do is to put the impossible out there. As the Kennedys, what's the Kennedy line? Some people ask why things are the way they are, and I ask why can't they be different? I can't remember the goddamn quote. As they are, and I ask how they could be. Yeah, whatever. The Kennedy line. And Kennedy saying, you know, Kennedy was the last aspirational Democrat I can think of, right? We will put a man on the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard, right? And in 1960, when he was saying land a man on the moon, understand that, you know, we were still in the fear of the Soviets and Sputnik. They had been the first to put a satellite in orbit, a living being in orbit, you know, the dog. They put a man in orbit, Yuri Gagarin, I think his name was. So they were beating our ass in the space race. We didn't have the technology to even pull this stuff off. And 9 years later, we were walking on the moon. Because you have to voice it. You have to give it reality. You have to put that aspiration out there, or you can never reach for it. So here are my suggestions. Even though I don't think they're possible, here's what we got to do. Number one, we need to establish ranked choice voting and multi-member districts. We've already seen with ranked choice voting what's going on in New York and some other places. Maine, that have adopted ranked choice voting, have seen much better turnout for progressives, Democrats, being able to function under this ranked choice voting system. It provides the best way for the most people to be satisfied with the choice. And the multi-member district things also helps to ensure that you get representation amongst the minority groups. I don't mean like racial minorities, but minority political groups, third parties. That would be the number one thing we could do to inject more progress and better representation under our democracy: ranked choice voting, multi-member districts. Next thing we got to do, we got to fix the Senate. The Senate is inherently undemocratic between its filibuster and its overrepresentation of rural states. California's got 40 million people and 2 senators. You can put 18 red states together that would have 40 million population, and they have 36 senators. That is what we talk about. We talk about structural racism, you know, critical race theory. Part of it is the structural system of American government in the Senate disproportionately favors rural, conservative, white states. So, how do we fix the Senate? Well, I have an idea called city states. According to our Constitution, it allows that every state should have 2 senators. So I suggest that we take the 50 largest cities or 50 largest metroplexes and make them city states. And what a city state would be is, for federal purposes, it's a state. So it gets 2 senators. It gets the proportionate number of representatives in the House of Representatives. It gets the proportional amount of electoral votes in the Electoral College. But for state purposes, it's still a city within its state. So, for example, New York City would get 2 federal senators and however many reps, 14, 15 representatives, and however many electoral votes as New York City, the city state. But as far as following state laws and having state troopers and state budget and all that, it's still a city within the state of New York, controlled by Albany and its government. So, city states, that would then give us 100 senators from urban areas, and the remaining 100 senators from the states out of which the city states had been carved would be rural senators, because necessarily their cities are already got their own senators. So it would create a Senate with a 50-50 balance of rural to urban, which is really what the whole red state, blue state thing is anyway. Oregon's a so-called blue state because it's got the cities of Portland and Eugene. The rest of it's red. And that's the way red states, Texas is a red state because of most of its voting, but if you go to Austin or Dallas, there's a lot of blue. So let's have the Senate reflect that with 100 blue senators from cities and 100 red senators from the states. There might be some constitutional problems with that. I don't know how to fix it, but again, we're aspiring here. Now, let's also fix the House of Representatives. One of the problems with the House of Representatives is it's been capped at 435 members since 1910, even though the population of America has grown since then. And we're in a situation now where one representative might represent up to 1 million people, at least 750,000 people. So let's add more representatives. In the past, I've suggested that we ratify Article the First, which was part of the original Bill of Rights. It's the only one that hasn't been added to our Constitution. And it specified that there should be one representative for every 50,000 Americans. Now, that would create us a House of Representatives with 6,225 reps in it. Might be a little big, but I still think it could work. I think you could have over 6,000 people in the House. Not if they all had to meet at one building in Washington, D.C., though. In my world, I'd have the 6,000 or so representatives that stay in their home office in their own district and do all their work online. Have Congress be completely online. The Senate still meets in their big building in Washington, D.C., but the Congress would do all their committee hearings and their markups and their interviews and all that stuff. Do it all online. Do all their votes online. That way, your representative is always back at your home district for you to go bug, go protest, go talk to. And each representative is only representing 50,000 people. So your voice is louder in comparison than being one voice out of 700,000 or one voice out of 1 million. Can you imagine your representative always being in town? And they could actually get more work done because they wouldn't have to be flying back and forth to D.C. all the time. Uncap the House. Also, we need more actual states. It is ridiculous that we still have territories and districts like Washington, D.C. or Puerto Rico, Guam, Virgin Islands, American Samoa, Northern Mariana Islands. They should all be states. This is ridiculous. Everybody should be a state that is governed by the United States so that they have a say in their governance. We started this whole thing on the idea of taxation without representation, right? Well, what's happening to these people in Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands and D.C. who are taxed but not represented? Let's get them some representation. Also, let's have paper trail vote by mail like we do here in Oregon. Every state should be vote by mail. Every state. We shouldn't have to require someone to have to get up and get out of their house and go stand in some goddamn long line at some elementary school somewhere to be able to choose our leaders. It's the 21st freaking century. Do this with paper trail, vote by mail. Send them. It's so beautiful here in Oregon. We get a whole voter's guide mailed out to us weeks before the election. You can research all the candidates. You can fill out your bubble sheets, sitting at the kitchen table, showing it to your kids while you're doing it. It's just a remarkable system. Let's also shorten the primary season. No reason these guys need to be running for election for a year and a half. I don't know how we do that with the First Amendment. We got to find a way. Speaking of the amendments, I got problems with each one of them. We're going to get into those here. First Amendment, freedom of speech, all for it. Love freedom of speech. But folks, money is not speech. We need to fix the Citizens United decision that equated the power of having money with the free speech that we all have, ending up with a situation where some people have more speech than others. It's contrary to the whole idea of the First Amendment. We got to fix that. Freedom of religion, all for that too, but we also need to have the responsibility of religion. This idea of religious exemptions in the world, you have a religious exemption from fulfilling your duty as a pharmacist or as some sort of medical provider because you think gay people are icky or abortion is illegal. Wrong. It's time to establish that freedom of religion does not mean the freedom to practice your religion and force it on others. Okay? If you have a religion, you're the one who has to sacrifice for it. If your religion says that abortion is murder, then you do not get to become an obstetrician. OBGYN is no longer an option for you. Just like if you're Muslim and you eschew alcohol, you don't get to be a bartender. If you're Amish and you eschew electricity, you don't get to be an electrician. You don't get to be a vegan waitress at Hooters who refuses to serve chicken wings. Your religion, your responsibility. What else in the First Amendment? Oh, we've got the freedom of the press. Okay, freedom of the press is great, except for now the press is owned by Jeff Bezos and Sun Ying, or whatever his name is. Patrick Soon something. It's time for us to have public funding of the press, like they do in Britain. It's time to have public broadcasting much better funded. It's time to have public subsidies for newspapers and local news outlets. It is way past time for that. Protesting. Oh, we have the right to protest, but we need to establish some more rights and responsibilities within that freedom to assemble peaceably. And that is to forbid, even more than we already do, because it's technically on the books now, forbid the use of tear gas and kettling techniques and rubber bullets against protesters and all of these things that are used by the cops to exacerbate violence, to cause violence where violence is not happening. It's time to address that. And the final part, oh yes, the nationwide initiatives and recalls. I had mentioned that in the earlier segment. It's time to establish some form of direct democracy so that the people themselves can be the final arbiter, can be the fourth branch of government. And, you know, for us to only have a say every 4 years, to be able to have an election where we elect a despot like Donald Trump, and we don't have any way of correcting that mistake. We have to depend on our elected officials to correct that mistake through impeachment, which they are not going to do. So the only say we have in that is a midterm election to try to elect enough people that then might get behind an impeachment. We allow in our system for a madman to run roughshod over our government for at least 2 years, because we have no mechanism to force a vote of no confidence, no mechanism to have a recall of any kind. So let's set up some sort of nationwide initiatives and recalls. All right, the Second Amendment. Oh boy, of course we got a problem with the Second Amendment. Actually, my problem isn't with the Second Amendment. My problem is with only interpreting half of it. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. How about a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state? Let's address that part. Because, folks, I'm actually for guns. I'm a pro-gun guy. I like guns. They're fun. And when you live out west and you live long distances away from the response time of 911, having firearms is a thing. It's something you do. But I don't think everyone should have a firearm, and I think what we should have this set up is to come up with some sort of nationally recognized militia card that you get to keep and bear arms so long as you are a member in good standing of your militia. Now, people in the past have talked about this being the National Guard, and that's true. The National Guard is kind of your state militia, but I would create another militia level, the county militia, under the direction of your county sheriff. And it'd go something like this. See, when I went to get my concealed handgun license, I have to go to the county sheriff's office and had to fill out a form and get, fingerprinted and background check, stuff like that, right? That's kind of the level I'm talking about for a county militia. To get your county militia card, you would go into the sheriff's office. They would do a simple background check on you, make sure you're not, a spouse beater, that you're not psychotic in any way, that you don't have major felony counts on your record, those kind of things. And you would be a member of the militia, of that county militia. And then every year, every 2 years, I don't know, however often, you go and get your militia card renewed. And any able, regular, normal dude who wants to own a gun, or gal who wants to own a gun, should be able to get that militia card. should be pretty easy. I've always said I would never support any sort of gun control measure that my 83-year-old dad and 78-year-old mom couldn't pass. Right? So I'm pretty open with people having guns, but not as open as some 20-year-old guy who wants to shoot the president can walk in and buy an AR-15 and 1,000 rounds of ammo. We need something better than that. We need a little more tracking than that. And for the gun folks that are like, well, I don't want to be on some government list, keeping track of government list. Folks, DOGE has already got you. like you're already on all the lists. Like the government has everything they need list-wise. And you're carrying around with you in your pocket a cell phone that is a tracker for anything the government wants to find out about you. That ship has sailed. This whole the government's going to track us stuff. They are. So let's start using that tracking to maybe keep us from getting shot in malls and shopping centers and synagogues and dance clubs and concerts and schools. Third Amendment. The Third Amendment's the one where you can't have a standing army quartered in civilian homes. We don't really think of the Third Amendment much. But nowadays, as we're putting together this ICE Gestapo army that's going to be living amongst us in our neighborhoods, maybe it's time to tinker around with that Third Amendment and interpret it in such a way that it's against the law for the government to be putting its agents in our streets. I know we already have posse comitatus, but apparently that's not enough. Let's make it somehow part of the Third Amendment. Fourth Amendment, unreasonable search and seizures. Where we really need to address that is with our phones and our phone privacy. This standard of cops being able to seize your phone and copying it and looking in through it. Though your phone now is your person, papers, houses, and effects, as was written in the 18th century. Your phone is that now. Now, folks like me, we know that when it comes to your phone, you don't do like the Face ID where you hold the phone up to your face and it opens. And you don't do your thumbprint ID where you just put your thumb on the phone and it opens. Because cops are legally allowed when they arrest you or detain you now to hold your phone up to your face or to make you put your thumb on the phone or to take your thumbprint like they normally take and then use that thumbprint on the phone to unlock your phone. Cops can legally do that right now. Can open up your phone and look at it if they can point it at you or use your thumb to get it to open. Do you think that really comports with the idea of the Fourth Amendment being secure on our person's pay? That's like saying if the cops come to your house and your door is ajar, they can just come on in. That's your phone. That's your door is ajar, right? Because you look at your phone and it opens right up. Fourth Amendment needs to cover data privacy, that we own our data. It is private and it cannot be looked at without a warrant, no matter how you can get into it, even if the phone is open, even if it is unlocked. Fifth Amendment. Fifth Amendment's against self-incrimination, double jeopardy, all that kind of stuff. And one of the things in the Fifth Amendment I would fix is the right to remain silent. So I don't know if you know this about police encounters, but being silent is not enough to invoke your right to remain silent. In order to invoke your right to remain silent, you must say, I invoke my right to remain silent. That's right. To remain silent, you must speak. Yeah. And I bring this up because there have been cases where people have been busted by cops and they just shut up. They don't say a thing. They don't say nothing. And later on, they take them down the wherever and they said something and then the cops use that against them. And they say, well, I was invoking my right to remain silent. Well, you never said you were. So that's ridiculous. Let's have a right to remain silent. Sixth Amendment. The Sixth Amendment's about crime, trials, right to jury, right to counsel, and so forth. To this, I would like to add something. I think we ought to have a penalty for prosecutorial misconduct, such that any prosecutor or cop that has been proven to have actively engaged in willful misconduct in the judicial system must be sentenced to the exact amount of time in the exact kind of place that the person they falsely accused had to serve. Yeah. So you get one of these exonerations where, you know, oh, we found out that the prosecutor didn't allow this evidence, or the cop planted this evidence or whatever, and the guy went to prison for 15 years before we found out and were able to exonerate him. That cop goes to prison for 15 years. That prosecutor goes to prison for 15 years. They serve the same amount of time they caused someone to falsely have to serve. That should be part of our Sixth Amendment. Seventh Amendment is our right to civil trials and to sue for anything that's worth over $20. This needs to be fixed to also include loser pays laws. Because what we have is a situation where in our civil courts, guys like Donald Trump can just sue and sue and sue and drag out the process to the point where you can't afford to stay in court anymore. British courts have this feature where if you go and sue someone, you try to take them into court and you lose, you've got to pay their legal fees for making them having to go out and defend themselves and get a lawyer. We need that kind of law in the United States. Loser pays in these civil suits. Eighth Amendment, no cruel and unusual punishments. That means it's time to get rid of the death penalty. And I know people say, well, Russ, the death penalty is in the Constitution. It's in the Constitution for treason. You can get the penalty of death. Yes, and so was slavery. Slavery was in the Constitution. Direct election of senators was in the Constitution. Lots of stuff was in the Constitution. Legislative appointment of senators. Lots of stuff was in the Constitution that was a relic from a bygone time. So is the death penalty. Now, I will tell you, I'm 100% in favor of the death penalty in any judicial system that's 100% perfect. You can show me a judicial system where no one has ever been falsely convicted, then I will 100% support the death penalty. But since such a thing is impossible, it is wrong, just morally wrong, for the state to kill someone when it's just there's no excuse for it. You can't undo that. And there's been over 250 people that have been exonerated, been taken off of death rows through the Innocence Project. So we know that it happens. People get falsely convicted. You cannot undo that mistake. I would make a caveat, though. Maybe one caveat. If you can show incontrovertible proof of a capital crime, like you've got the video of the guy murdering someone in cold blood, you've got the actual video. No way, it's verified, it's not a AI deep fake. You can prove this guy actually did the murder, 100% incontrovertible. Maybe I'd allow the death penalty for that under the condition that the victim, the victim's family, whoever, has to be the one that pushes the button, that starts the electric chair, that fires the shot, that does you have to do the death penalty. You have to be the one that kills them, not the state. That maybe we make that as a victim's rights thing. Someone could get the death penalty, but the victim's family has to execute them. Let that hang on their heads rather than all of us taxpayers. All right, Ninth Amendment. We don't hear a lot of talk about the Ninth Amendment, and we should, because the Ninth Amendment states that just because the Constitution wrote down a whole bunch of rights, that doesn't mean that's all the rights that everyone has. I'm paraphrasing a bit. It's basically the enumeration in this Constitution of certain rights shall not deny or disparage other rights held by the people. I think I got close there. But what the Ninth Amendment says to me is we have unalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but that's among many of them. We've got lots of rights that aren't written down. In my mind, the Ninth Amendment should be our bedrock right to privacy, our right to identity, our right to be. So within that, so nothing in the U.S. Constitution says anything about personal privacy, and the state constitutions and the U.S. Constitution hasn't delegated to the states the rights to deal with all privacy. So the 9th Amendment tells me that privacy is our right, that we already have it. So under the 9th Amendment, abortion should be completely legal. We should have a federal right to privacy. Our data should be owned by us. We should be paid for the data that these companies are using and selling from us. There should be a complete right to take any substance you like to take, to alter your consciousness in any way you want to be. A complete right to be transgender or gay or bisexual or whatever religion you want to be. That should all be covered under the 9th Amendment. The 13th Amendment, that's the amendment that ended slavery, except as punishment for a crime. So that means slavery still exists in the United States if you can just find some crime to commit to the slaves have committed. And that is going to be used here, just as Brooke Rollins said earlier in the show, to return us to serfdom. You're either in this country illegally or we'll find some reason that you committed some crime, and then we'll put you to work in the fields. So end slavery, period. Even if someone committed a crime. Someone can be the worst criminal in the world, and you could say, here's this opportunity to work in the fields if you want to, but you don't have to. There should be no punishment for rejecting that work as a prisoner, because slavery should always be illegal. 14th Amendment. Well, there's one big glaring hole now in the 14th Amendment, the one that says that insurrectionists cannot hold public office. Let's tighten that up a little bit, shall we? From this terrible decision from the Roberts Court that said, oh, no, Congress has to say that they committed an insurrection, even though the 14th Amendment already says Congress can remove this disability by a 2/3 vote. So if they can vote to remove it, it must already exist. No. Couldn't do that, because then Trump wouldn't have been able to run for office. And my goodness, he put 3 of us here. So fix the 14th Amendment. 15th Amendment. 15th Amendment is equal protection under the law, which banned discrimination on the account of race. Well, it's time to expand that. Of course, the ERA would have already expanded that. It's already been ratified by 38 states, but for some reason, Biden wouldn't move forward with it, with having the archivists actually enter it into our Constitution as it should be, or at least setting up the fight over it that we should have. Nope, Democrats weren't sure they were going to win, so it wasn't worth fighting over. Time to update the 15th Amendment so that the laws apply equally all throughout the land for all people of all minorities. We need to fix the 22nd Amendment. That's the term limits amendment for the President of the United States. It needs to be expanded to all federal offices. And I've told you this before, I think there ought to be a federal term limit of 12 years. You can do any federal gig for 12 years. But you can do other federal gigs for another 12 years. So I'd make it, if you got elected to the House of Representatives, you could serve 6 terms. 6 times 2, that's 12 years. And then you're done in the House of Representatives. You could then run for Senate. In the Senate, you could run for 2 terms. 2 times 6, there's your 12 years. 2 terms as a senator. Now, this is going to mean a lot of turnover in the Senate because they can only serve for 2 terms. As it should be. It's the upper house. It should have a little bit more turnover. And in my world where we're going to have 50 city states and 50 rural states, maybe more turnover would be warranted. And president, you could run for 3 terms. I'd be fine with a 3-term president just to keep it even, because this whole idea of like you win your first term and then your whole first term, you're doing nothing but trying to set yourself up to win the second term. But then in your second term, now you're a lame duck. Like, let's have a 3rd term so that there's a middle term there where maybe some shit could get done. And then there's a couple of other amendments I'd like to add. I think we ought to have healthcare as a human right. That's one of our amendments. Like, you should absolutely be guaranteed healthcare, and the government should be in charge of providing it. Now, there could still be private healthcare. That's fine. You want to also have private healthcare, great. If you can afford that stuff, fine. But there ought to be a baseline level of public healthcare available to every human being in the United States of America. And a housing amendment similarly structured. Housing should be a human right. No human being in the United States of America should be sleeping outside in a tent that's not out camping somewhere or sleeping on a sidewalk. This is ridiculous. Now, I don't know what it takes. Maybe we have the little dormitories. Maybe we have the little closets like they have in Japan where it's like, a little 6-foot thing that you can stay in, whatever. There has to be a solution, and it has to be nationwide. There it is. There's my solutions. I know this has been a long podcast. I've gone on quite a bit, but I had a whole lot to say about this. Let's call that Article 5 Constitution Convention, and let's get to work on repairing our founding document for the next 250 years. You roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey! Well, that's all the time we've got this week for the smoke session. God, it was long enough. We've gone over, 2.25 hours here? Jesus Christ, I can talk. The Radical Russ Show is produced, directed, researched, written, recited, posted, and catered by me, Radical Russ Belville, and governed by Creative Commons Share-alike licensing. News clips and social media posts are reproduced under fair use copyright laws for commentary and analysis. My main theme is We Love the Herb by Herbal Nation, and interstitial music is by me and my drum machine. Which brings me to our post-credits scene. I saw word that the NCAA is thinking about expanding the basketball tournament, the March Madness basketball tournament. It was 64 teams. They increased it to 68 a few years back. They added the first 4 play-in games. Now they're talking about increasing to 72 or 76, have some more play-in games. Jesus, guys, let's just get to the thing we're all looking for, right? Let's expand March Madness to 1,024 teams. Yeah, 1,024. Let's just have all Division I, Division II, and Division III teams all in one big tournament. We can have an East Regional where number 1 Purdue defeats number 256 Division III Maranatha Baptist 156-6. We can start it off that way. Listen, every team in the nation plays in March Madness, and your bracket will be one, huge newspaper sheet size you have to fill out. They'll start in middle of March. The finals will be in June sometime. Anything for $1, right, guys? Oh, and the other thing I wanted to bring up here, I've had some fun recently talking to one of these AI chatbots. Someone described them as, massively hallucinating, delusional robots. And I thought, what better thing to talk to with a massively delusional robot than religion? So I started asking questions to the chatbot about the Christian religion and about the Mormon religion. I found some interesting things. Number 1, in the Christian religion, there is an unpardonable sin, and the unpardonable sin is the rejection of the Holy Spirit. However, the only way you know that the unpardonable sin has become unpardonable is if the person has died having never accepted the Holy Spirit. So, the unpardonable sin is pardonable so long as you're alive and take the pardon, but if you don't take the pardon, that's the evidence that it was unpardonable. Seems kind of tautological, but okay. And then I learned in the Mormon religion, very interesting in the Mormon religion, that God has a penis. Yes, God definitely has a penis in the Mormon religion. God is definitely male. And God was a man who lived on a planet, who became godly, and then ascended to the place where he became a god and created his own planet, so that the God we worship now here used to be a man, and we as men, and again, only men, not women, we as men could worship that God well enough to ascend to become gods ourselves, in which we would then create more men and women who could then become gods. And this entire process is infinite. There was no first God. There have always been men who then ascend to become gods, who then create men who ascend to become gods, who then create men. This has gone on forever and ever in a system in which God exists and did not create. There is a system of intelligence and truth and beauty and good and evil, kind of these Platonic ideals that exist outside of universes and gods altogether, and in which gods must create. So a God in the Mormon religion can't create a universe without evil or without good or without truth or without beauty. And throughout all of these universes, every universe that's created will have some sort of Christ figure who will accept atonement, and some sort of Satan figure who will lead people astray, though they won't always be called Jesus or God or Jesus or Satan or whatever. They'll just be figures that, because that's the destination of every universe that's ever created by this infinite series of gods. Wow! Yeah, I'd have to give up caffeine too. You can contact me by email at radicalruss@gmail.com. Call my message line at 877-RUSS-420. That's 877-877-420. And reach me on social media on Blue Sky as radicalruss.com and nowhere else. You can support this podcast financially by donating to Radical Russ on Venmo, Rad Russ on Cash App, or via PayPal on my website at radicalruss.com. Get this podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, my website, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and until next week, take care of each other.
Take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it.